All right, we are live.
Hello again.
Happy hump day. It's Wednesday.
Yeah. Do days matter anymore? I don't think they do.
Never.
Brushing your hair doesn't matter anymore. I mean, we were talking about
even when you brush your hair, it's still in quarantine hair. That should be like a hashtag.
I'm sure it is. We'll have to check.
Yeah, true.
Okay. All right. So we're going to talk about fasting, right? So
yes. Let me just make sure. So when the comments, okay, let's see. Okay, got it. Oh no, not that one. Sorry. Hey, Erica. Okay, people are starting to come in. Okay, so this talk is going to be on fasting. The reason why we kind of had this impromptu live session is because Ashleigh and I did a 36-hour fast, which we're going to talk about why we did it. And people had questions, or like, it's just going to be easier to kind of come on and answer the questions live, and also just talk a little bit about fasting, because there are so many different like rabbit holes you can go down with fasting. So yeah, it's hard to respond to comments, and like I found myself writing out paragraphs when I was trying to respond to people. So yeah, welcome everybody in.
So why don't you start, like, because I did the fast because you were doing a fast, and you're like, hey, you want to do this? And I'm like, all right, fine. So talk about like maybe why you decided to do it and kind of how the process was.
Yeah. So there's two main reasons why I wanted to do this specific fast. It was kind of a last minute thing. It wasn't something that I had planned out. I planned it I realized I wanted to do it on Friday. And so the two reasons why I wanted to do this specific 36-hour fast is the first one was because I actually did a diet break last week, which I talked about in my podcast that I released yesterday. So it's all about diet breaks, refeeds, increasing calories, potentially increasing carbs for some of the benefits. So I had done a week diet break, and I actually increased my carbs to the highest that I've ever done for that long of a time period. Probably since like 5 years ago, maybe. So I increased my carbs to about 175 grams per day for 6 days. All coming from like sweet potatoes and veggies and all of that.
Did you adjust your fat at all, or was it?
Yeah, so I brought my fat down a little bit, but again, this is a diet break, so my calories came back up to maintenance for what I'm doing right now. And I talked about like all of that in the podcast. So I don't want to get too far into like diet breaks and refeeds, but if you're interested in that, like I literally go into it for an hour or so on the podcast that I put out yesterday. So that was the first reason. The first reason was because I wanted to actually see how metabolically flexible I was. And I kind of came to the end of the diet break. I was feeling good. I was like, this would be the time to test this after doing a week-long, almost 200 grams of carbs per day. And it wasn't something that I planned. I didn't plan it because I wanted to like, after the diet break, I wanted to, reduce my calories again. It had nothing to do with like calories or anything like that. It just had to do with, I want to see how metabolically flexible I am, and this is the time to do it. And I wanted to experiment and all that. I love doing experiments. So that was the first thing. The second reason was because just like over the past kind of 3-4 weeks, I've just been in like, I don't know, this mental funk. Like I haven't felt challenged, right? For myself. Like I felt challenged, but mentally I was just like needed kind of something where I could be like, okay, like get out of my comfort zone, something that can just kind of, I don't know, get out of my comfort zone, accomplish something, feel like, I did that. I didn't die. So now I have like, I'm building up that resiliency, right? We talk about the physical and the mental resiliency that you want to build up, right? And so one of the ways to do that is one of the easiest ways to do that is a fast that is a little bit longer than like a normal intermittent fast. So that's why I chose the 36 hours. And those are the two main reasons. The 36 hours was because I just wanted it to be a full day. And for me, I've done 24-hour fasts in the past. And when I get to the night, so for the fast, it started on Sunday night at 8 p.m. when I finished eating. And then if I were to do just 24 hours, then I would start to eat again the next night at 8 p.m. But the reason I didn't want to do that is because, one, I have a tendency to snack at night. And so I know that if I would have had my first meal after a 24-hour fast at night, I probably would have just continued to eat for like a few hours, right? So I was like, I don't want to do that because I know myself, I've done this before. So I was like, why don't I just extend it to the next morning? So the entire day was a fast with just water, coffee, and tea, and then wake up in the morning and have a regular day. So those were the two main reasons why I wanted to do this. And then also just the benefits of incorporating a longer term fast once in a while. Again, this is the first time I've done a 36-hour fast, probably in like 6 months, maybe. So yeah, okay. That's the reasoning. And I asked Ashleigh to join me because, last reason why I asked you to join, because when you have an accountability partner, especially when it comes to fasting, you have someone who's doing it with you, it's a lot easier to kind of stick with it. And it's kind of fun to like, go back and forth and be like, hey, how are you doing? And stuff like that. So
what foods are you dreaming of right now? Yeah. So for my side of it, I did it a little bit differently, but for probably a lot of the same reasons. I mean, first of all, I'm never going to say no to any kind of like friendly challenge. So you're like, hey, I'm fasting. You want to do that? I'm like, all right. So it's just like, why not? Because, it's for the exact same reasons, the metabolic flexibility part. It's a great way to kind of keep yourself on your toes. Like, I've been eating very kind of, not even strictly, but I've had a pretty like rigid kind of schedule since quarantine started on purpose that I wouldn't go off the rails. And I don't tend to incorporate a lot of fasting because I see the benefits and I understand the benefits, and I just don't think it's a priority for me right now. I think that for me personally, it's more of a priority to just focus on maybe portion control, focus on food quality. But with that said, knowing that fasting is a tool available to me and I can use it is good. It's any kind of tool you can add to your toolbox is good. So what I decided to do was, and it worked out perfectly because it was Easter. It started Easter Sunday, and I had just like crushed a bunch of Easter chocolate. So which I already planned to do, and I wasn't planning on not eating the next day because of it, but it just sort of worked out that way. And it is again a perfect test of your metabolic flexibility. Can you eat a bunch of sugar and then not eat the next day and freak out or not? So it's pretty cool. But so I decided to push mine to 40 hours for actually similar scheduling reasons, because I've been trying not to eat until around lunchtime. I've been trying to do that compressed eating window. And the way the 36 hours was set up, I would have basically been starting to eat like first thing in the morning on Tuesday. And I said, let's just see if I can push it to lunchtime, which I did. But I did a little bit differently in that I incorporated a cup or two of bone broth, homemade bone broth, during that 40-hour fast. So it wasn't it wasn't a 0 calorie fast. It was a vastly reduced calorie fast. And the calories that were coming in were from mostly fat, maybe a little bit of protein. And a lot of people have asked me about that. They're like, what's the difference between like a bone broth fast versus a complete fast, or a protein sparing fast, or all these different fasts? And basically, again, how I see it, because I think something that you and I are both talking about a lot is this concept of sort of moderation and balance and doing what works for you versus what the hard and fast rules are, and just following what someone else is doing because you think that's the gold standard. And when you think about what the purpose of a fast is, if it's to, maybe reset your hunger signals, or if it's to reset after eating crappy food, or if it's just to get back in ketosis, or if it's to, prove to yourself you've got this metabolic flexibility, the goal isn't to make sure you don't eat a single calorie in 2 days. It's to, mainly really it's the sort of blood sugar situation, right? And the raising your blood sugar, raising all that kind of stuff. So if you eat only fat, a lot of people do these fat fasts, so they're eating like just fat, no protein, no carbs. That's not going to raise your blood sugar, and it's sort of giving you a lot of the same benefits of a fast while you're still getting some calories, which can help if you tend to get hangry, or if you're anxious about not eating, or if you're worried about losing weight. Maybe you don't want to lose weight, So anyway, with all that said, I probably drank 200, 300 calories worth of bone broth. I don't think it was really a whole lot, but I think it probably helped me feel better during the day. And again, it wasn't about like following this specific set of rules 100%. It was like, what are you trying to get out of this? Okay, set yourself up for success with what you're trying to get out of it. And I felt really good. Like, again, it's kind of depressing to me how my hunger has gone down during quarantine just because I'm moving so much less. Like, I'm used to being very active and a big eater. And since this whole quarantine thing has started, I'm like, it's not that I don't have an appetite, but it's gone down so much that this was like surprisingly easy for me, because I'm like, I'm barely moving. Like, I'm, even if I'm going for a walk during the day, like I just,
And so you had like a big amount of carbs on Sunday. Like, how much? You had a lot of chocolate. How much would you like estimate how many carbs you had Sunday? I'm just curious.
That's tough because honestly, I really have not been tracking anything for the longest time. Like, I just eyeball it 100%. I would guess on an average day that I'm generally getting probably around like 120 grams of protein, probably in the like 70 to 80 grams of fat, and probably 100 to 125 grams of carbs generally. So I'm like really quite moderate. Like my fat's high for the average person, but because most people try not to eat any fat, but I really am quite like moderately placed in terms of my macros, unless I'm really tweaking it for a specific reason. I mean, I would guess on Sunday, I probably ended up eating closer to like maybe 250 grams of carbs, something like that. But I really don't. I just ate some chocolate. I just ate chocolate until I felt like not eating but I really didn't, like, I didn't even get like stomach grumbles. Like, when you have to like kind of pass that hump of like hunger and you kind of feel icky, and then like 10 minutes later you feel fine. I didn't even have that. I was just like, like I just wasn't, it was fine. So I feel good about it. And I really, it is again, just a reminder that I think that we both have kind of achieved that level of metabolic flexibility where we can do this if we want to. And I think it's just a reminder for anybody who's interested in this to, first of all, think about your goals, think about why you would want to do this first, and then you can adjust the rules of the fast based on what you're really trying to achieve out of it. Another thing we talked about in that little thread, the reason why, because we had talked about offline, possibly doing like a 24-hour fast with the group. And I mean, there's some research out there right now that fasting isn't the best choice during quarantine and for immunity purposes in general. Like anything, not to say your regular 15, 18, 20-hour fasts, you should stop doing those, but like trying to push these 2, 3, 4-day fasts during quarantine, generally speaking, probably isn't the best idea. It's just kind of adding stress to an already stressful situation. So there was that. And then there's just the idea that this really does have to be personalized and specific. And so many of us in this group are coming from such different schedules and eating plans and situations, stress-wise, and all of these things. It just wouldn't have made a lot of sense for us to all try to do the same thing like that. So that was kind of why we decided not to move forward with it, but we're still happy to talk about it and answer questions.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it all comes back to the stress load, right? So we're all in different situations. For me, like, I'm not really stressed out at all right now. I mean, days anymore. There's always a little stress, but like this is kind of my normal for, for life, right? Besides not going to the gym. So for me, it wasn't like a stressful time, and really like you said, you were mentioning the hunger pangs and stuff. So I just want to mention that. So I did have so when you're fasting, especially when it's longer term fast, you go through kind of these hunger pangs. So it's kind of like a wave. Like, hunger in general comes in waves, right? And so for me, I actually only had like one wave of hunger around noonish, where I was like I felt it, but it went away after like 10 minutes. And I was like, all right, I'm good. And so that was surprising to me, because really I thought that personally, I thought going into it, I was like a little bit nervous, because I was like, okay, I literally just had 200 grams of carbs, around 200 for 7 days straight. How has my blood sugar been doing? I haven't been testing it or anything like that. I had a continuous glucose monitor on like a month ago. So that would have been cool to have that, but I don't have one anymore. So yeah, for me, it was like, I felt good. I had some hunger at night, a little bit, just like a little, right before I was going to bed. And then I woke up the next morning and I felt really good. And just having that, we talked about this a little bit with the emotional eating and the structure and things like that. And in that article you posted, it talked about the domino effect, right? And so I knew that personally, if I could get through something hard, right? For me, this was a little bit, it's hard to do a 36-hour fast for anybody. If they don't say it's hard, like you're lying. Like there's a little bit of effort. And I'm not saying like you obviously said it wasn't like too bad, but it's still like I don't know, mentally
effort involved, certainly.
Yes. Unless you do it like every single week and things like that, then it becomes, another type of habit and your body gets used to all that, whatever. But for me, I woke up and I was like, wow, like I accomplished something that was a little bit hard, a little bit out of my comfort zone for, what it's been in the past month. And I literally just woke up feeling just empowered, right? I was like, I did hard shit. I didn't die and let's go. Like I'm ready to take on this week. And it's that domino effect, right? And so for me, it was just that mental kind of resiliency and building that up. And then also testing my metabolic flexibility. And so I did test my ketones I didn't post this, but I woke up on Tuesday and tested my ketones using have you heard of the BioSense breath ketone meter? It's like the new thing. So I did that and I was, in ketosis, had a high number. And I was just curious about that. And I could just tell because my brain was, I don't know. I can just tell like when I'm in ketosis and not that the goal was to get back into ketosis generally, but yeah. So anyway, that was why we did it, why we didn't really say anything about it because we didn't want to, like you said, Ashleigh, didn't want to like make it something where you had to feel like you had to join in on it. But we hope to continue this something like this past the 21 days and do stuff like this. So we'll definitely I think doing a group fast with people is definitely, like we said, the buddy system and things like that. It gives you another sense of like accountability. So I think that's super important. But again, it also comes down to like what your goals are and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think a couple things, maybe we can just go over some like general advice for the few women who are commenting and saying they were interested in it. And then if any questions come in, we can answer those.
Yeah.
But
feel free to ask questions if you're here.
Yeah. But just sort of in general terms, some high level things that I would say, and Rachel just weigh in, or you can kind of speak to what you think after, because again, none of this necessarily like, there are some hard and fast rules, but a lot of what we're talking about, there's nuance to it and there's sort of opinion and personal opinion and feelings and like anecdotal evidence. So like none of this necessarily is like a super hard science. We'll kind of get into it, but basically a lot of people are asking sort of like how you start, how you get into it. And I think that the big thing you should remember first is gradually. So nobody go do a 40-hour fast the first time you try to fast or do a compressed eating window. Don't do that. It's stressful. It's going to make you hangry. It's probably going to make you binge later. Like that's not a good idea. If you normally eat, if you eat dinner at 8 p.m. and then eat breakfast at 8 a.m., you might want to start with a 13 or 14-hour fast, which means literally just try to eat dinner an hour earlier in the evening and then try to eat breakfast an hour later. And pay attention to how you feel when you wake up in the morning. Are you starving, or is your body just telling you eat breakfast because it's time to eat breakfast, right? Pay attention to this kind of stuff. And then if you're actually really interested in exploring this as a means of maybe fat loss or improving your control over your eating habits, do it in a gradual way where maybe the first 3 days you're doing a 14-hour fast. And if that feels good, then the next 3 days do a 15-hour fast. And you also want to play with, you can do it sort of front loaded or back loaded. So it used to be, I think that conventional wisdom was that you, I don't know if people started out, it was mostly like skipping breakfast. Like people would push and have a bigger meal late at night. A lot of people prefer to eat a bigger meal earlier in the day and taper off in the evening. That's how I prefer it generally, not in quarantine, but generally when I'm busy and working out in the morning, I like to get up and I'm ready to go and I'm hungry and I eat a bunch of food and then I go live my life and it kind of tapers off and I try to finish eating like really early in the day, for example. So play with that. So think about it. If you generally are super hungry at night, don't stop eating at 3 p.m. and then suffer all night. Or if you generally are never hungry in the morning, then just try to skip your breakfast in the morning. Like try to do it that way. So there's that element. there's the idea too that fasting doesn't always, it can, but it doesn't always mean eating less calories. So when I'm doing this compressed eating window and I'm skipping breakfast, it doesn't mean I'm skipping those calories. It just means I'm skipping that mealtime. So I'm often, and a lot of people will continue to try and eat the same amount of calories, and finding that you still do reap a lot of those like benefits of fat loss and getting into ketosis or being fat adapted while still eating the same calories, which is why a lot of people consider fasting like this sort of cheat workaround, because you can still kind of eat the same amount of food and you may find that you're leaning out or losing a little bit of fat. With that said, if maybe you are eating too much, or you're going over your maintenance calories and you're trying to cut down, fasting can be a way to cut it without feeling like you're being super restrictive too, because then you're eating like less food, but also in a less time period. So you feel, less restrictive about it. So those are all kind of things to consider. But I also, the last thing I just want to say before Rachel, I want you to weigh in, is I consider fasting a tool and also a small tool in the overall toolbox, and one that's like a fine-tuning implement. It's like something you use when a lot of the other stuff is sorted out. So people will hear about fasting and they'll think, okay, this is the new thing and it's going to help me live longer and it's going to improve everything and all this stuff. And so I'm just going to go right into fasting. I'm going to try to do fasting. And maybe they still need to really work on eating whole foods and choosing the right foods and knowing how much of whatever to eat to support your goals. And, so it's one of these things where like people are trying to use that tool as a sort of coverall, a Band-Aid for these other issues that they're actually experiencing. So I would recommend, if you're already feeling pretty sorted out, like you feel good about your diet, you feel good about your energy levels and your sleep and your exercise and all of that stuff, and you want to tweak and play around with eating windows and fasting, great. But if you still have a bunch of issues around like feeling out of control around your eating, or being obsessive about tracking things, or having a dysfunctional, disordered attitude towards eating, if all of your other lifestyle factors are still kind of in a mess, don't throw fasting on top of it, because it's just going to add to the stress and add to the chaos. So that's kind of my feeling about it.
Sorry, I just have 3 thoughts that I want to make sure I hit on. So yeah, everything you said, totally agree with. So the first thing is kind of piggybacking off of what you said with fasting, especially I call it like going down the fasting rabbit hole. And I think that I went through this for a period of time. I have a lot of clients that I work with who have gone through this. It's like you fast, you feel good, you start to get that euphoria. Maybe you are trying to change your body composition, and then you keep pushing it. You get to the point where you have literally gone down the fasting rabbit hole, especially for women. And you've added this big stress load, and now you are kind of afraid to eat. Maybe you've been fasting, till noon or 1 o'clock every day for months. And you're like, I don't want to eat breakfast because 1, maybe I'm not like feeling that hunger during that time. 2, I just like, if I eat breakfast, I just feel like I've maybe failed or whatever it may be. The thing, especially with women, and I talk about this like in my Keto Forum program, one of the first lessons is all about fasting for women specifically, and how our bodies are more sensitive. Like no matter what, we have more sensitive hormones than men do. So fasting, when it comes to women specifically, there are a lot of different things you have to be careful of. The main thing is the overall stress load to your body. So the allostatic load, that's what we call it, is the overall stress that you are experiencing. So with fasting, you have to be careful, because fasting is a stress to your body. It can be a good stress and it can be a bad stress, right? Bad stress in the sense, if you're experiencing stress from all different areas of your life, if you're working out, 6 days a week, you are for like 2 hours straight, you're doing tons of HIIT workouts, your kids are crying all over the place, and you're just like stressed out, right? There's all these different life stressors. Then fasting on top of that is probably not going to be the best idea. If Ashleigh said you're kind of all, sorted out, things aren't too stressful, then maybe fasting is a good tool to use. So, but especially for women, we have to realize that we are more sensitive. So if your husband or your boyfriend can fast all the time and not have any negative consequences, it's because
good for him.
Right? Yeah. So that's one thing. So just knowing your kind of overall stress level and allostatic load is so important. the second thing I want to hit on is there's all different types of fasting, right? And so there's two things that I want to hit on because I know someone asked, like, and I get this question all the time. I'm sure you do too, Ashleigh. What breaks a fast, right? And we talked a little bit about this, but it all comes back to what the goal of the fast is. So for example, I personally do like fat fasting, like you said. If I want to do some intermittent fasting, I don't personally enjoy black coffee in the morning. So if I want to do, say, a 14-hour fast or 16-hour fast, I usually do like a little bit of creamer in my coffee or something like that, just because it helps me, or some MCT powder, just because it helps me get to that 16 hours if that's what I want. Or usually in the morning, like if I wake up and I'm not hungry, I'll just have my coffee with cream. If I wake up and I'm hungry, I'll have some hard-boiled eggs. It depends like how I'm feeling. But for me, it's like just that little bit. And I would say, I tell people, anything under really like between 50 and 100 calories of a fat source is probably a good place to be, because, and especially coming from fat, right? If you're just getting that from a teaspoon of sugar in your coffee, probably not the best, because we're talking about that blood sugar regulation, right? So that's what I would say. For what breaks your fast, it goes back to what the goal is. So if your goal is to just get to that 16-hour period, maybe you are trying to compress your window to help with your calorie intake. Maybe if you're in a deficit and you know that you can adhere better to your day if you push your window off of eating, or if you bring it down on the other side of things at night, then having like 50 calories in your coffee, if that gets you there, then that gets you there. If your goal is a longer fast, so for me, that 36-hour fast, because I knew that I wasn't going to have any calories or anything, I wanted to push myself to say, okay, I'm going to drink black coffee this morning. And also the kind of all of the autophagy benefits that we hear about with fasting, there's like, it's like a spectrum, right? And there's research out there about it. But I think that it's different for everyone. And a lot of people, you also have to realize that autophagy doesn't just come from fasting. It also comes from exercise and things like that. So that's another piece of it. So I would say, if you're asking the question, what breaks a fast, you just have to think about what your goal of the fast is. And if the goal, like I said, just think about what the goal is. If it's autophagy, then probably, and if you're doing a longer fast, then probably no calories, right? No, nothing, black coffee, things like that. If it's just to get to a certain, time period, then maybe you have a little bit of fat in your coffee or MCT powder like I do. And then it just goes back to what the goal is. And then the second thing I want to talk about is there's different types of fasting on top of that. So there's fat fasts. Something that I regularly implement, and this is something that I implement in the Keto Forum program, is protein sparing modified fast. So PSMF days. Have you ever done that before, Ashleigh, or heard of that?
I've heard of it. I mean, I tend to go the opposite way and do like protein only eating fat, not eating fat and carbs. But yeah.
So basically, the traditional PSMF is a longer term. It's like a diet in itself. It's literally, if you look up psmf.com, like there's a website. The traditional PSMF is you are literally doing a protein sparing modified fast for like weeks on end, and then you do specific refeeds. So how I implement PSMF days, I started doing this over a year ago, and this really helped me to adhere when I had lost that amount of weight, when I was in a cut. I wanted to consume, and I talked about this yesterday in my podcast with refeed days and things like that. For adherence wise, I wanted to be able to consume more calories on the weekend, because I knew that that's what I could adhere to better. So I decided to implement one PSMF day per week. And basically how I structure it and how I, structure this with my Keto for Women is it's 1,000 calories. You can go off of weight and things like that, but the easiest way is it's 1,000 calories. It's a day of 1,000 calories. And the main goal is to hit your protein goal, because it's a protein sparing modified fast. And the way to figure that out is it's basically 1 to 1.2 grams per pound of your body weight. If you are over 200 to 250 pounds over that level, then it's 1 to 1.2 grams per pound of your ideal body weight. That's just the easiest way to figure out. And so whatever that brings you to calorie wise, and then you just fill in fats and carbs till you hit that 1,000 calories. Ideally, those are just a little bit of fat, and then mostly like green veggies, green leafy veggies, fibrous veggies, and stuff like that. So that's how I implement a PSMF day, and that's how I do it with the women in my program. And again, that is more of just an adherence tool. So if we're talking about, body recomposition and adherence to your calories for the week, I'm not going to go too far into this, but I just want to mention one more thing. Sorry, I'm talking a lot. A lot of people, when they think about calories too, when we talk about calories, when we talk about being in a deficit, calories don't reset overnight, right? So it doesn't happen like that. You don't just wake up the next morning and the calories you ate yesterday are there. That's it. You want to look at, if you're looking at a deficit and you're planning your diet, I personally think the easiest way is to look at your weekly caloric intake, what your maintenance is, bring that down to your deficit. You can figure all that out. But if you look at it on a weekly basis, you can plan your week so that you can implement things that are called calorie cycling. And this is where that PSMF day comes in, or whatever. So for me, it's like I have one PSMF day per week, and then that allows me to eat more calories on the weekend and get that refeed in on the weekend while still being in that deficit. And so I'm not going to go into this anymore, but I talk about this a little bit in the podcast from yesterday, but that's another form of fasting. And so there's all different forms. There's PSMF days, fat fasting. There's just different ways to do it, different eating windows, all of that. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that one seems like it's a little bit more complicated. It seems like that might be one that you might want to have somebody like Rachel actually be like guiding you, assisting you through. And I mean, I can definitely see the benefits. I also could see, like, for me personally, I'm like, that's way too much work and tracking, and I don't, you know what I mean? Like again, for everybody who benefits greatly from paying that kind of attention, there are people who are like, this is just going to lead me down a crazy rabbit hole of like, it's like a beautiful minding your calories every day. You're like, where do I, it's like, it's so, I mean, it is like the good point to take from this is that there are so many different ways to do it. And you can almost find a fasting protocol if you want one that's going to be in line with how you already eat. So like, I would say for the most part that people are probably doing this for either fat loss purposes, for creating better habits around eating when you need to versus when you just want to. And I would think that probably for most of the women listening, it's going to be more about managing carbs than anything else, because most people are not crazy overeating fat. Some people do. I'm one of them actually, but most people aren't getting fat from eating fat. Most women certainly are not gaining weight or getting fat from eating too much protein. That's definitely not a problem, really, for most people. So like for most people, it seems like it would be a better approach to think about just eating whole foods, however that lines up for you, compressing the eating window if you're looking to pay more attention, be mindful to when you actually need to eat, and if you're trying to lose some fat, and not overcomplicating things at the beginning. Like again, the stuff, some of the next level stuff that you're talking about is tweaks when people are already like ready for the next level. I think for the most part, there's some like very kind of basic general guidelines we can follow, but let's answer some of these questions. Let's see.
And I just want to say one thing before. So I think that me and Ashleigh work well together because there's this spectrum of everything, right? You're on a spectrum, you're here, you're there. It changes throughout your life. And I feel like we both have different, like we're not doing the same exact thing. Yeah. We have different views on things, which is normal and good. And you should have that. You should have your own opinion. You should have your own experiences. And so I think that we vibe really well together because we have different we're on different spectrums. So we can kind of connect with people who are and meet you where you're at. That's the main thing. We want to meet you where you're at. And so the advice we're giving you or the tools and the strategies is how I look at them. These are all just tools in your toolbox, right? Yep. And so being aware of these tools and maybe trying them out, you could find that, it helps you or it doesn't. And so that's what we're trying to kind of accomplish here, just give you resources, give you tools, and realize that there's no one size fits all for anything or anyone.
Yeah. None of them are necessarily right or wrong. It's just what's going to work for individuals, which is again what I think we keep trying to hammer home. But all right, so
let's answer some questions. So Erica's actually in my Keto Foreman and Metflex tribe. So if I were to do a 36-hour 0-calorie bone broth fast, would you recommend doing a normal day of eating, lean into the fast, or taper calories a little the day before?
Well, let's see if we have different opinions about this. I mean, again, like so much of it, it's like, it depends on, you know, have you done this before, and how are you eating generally? Are you eating keto, or are you eating a lot of carbs, or, you know, there's a lot of little nuance that would work here. But I would personally think that I wouldn't recommend tapering, certainly. I also wouldn't really recommend eating more, like kind of like prepping for the fact that you're not going to eat for a day by eating more. I would say, though, that the type of food that you eat probably matters more than like how much. And so this is another one of those like do as I say, not as I do, because I just ate chocolate and then did a 40-hour fast, but I'm not new to this. And that's not the ideal way to do it. So I wouldn't think like, okay, I'm not going to eat for 36 hours, so I'll carb up the day before, because we all know how carbs work. Carbs give us this kind of cycle situation. They're quick energy and then they're gone and we crash. So I would maybe prioritize eating the same amount of food, the amount of food that makes you feel satisfied and nourished, and focus mostly, as always, on protein first, and then some healthy, nourishing fats that go with it. And again, you don't have to not skip the carbs. If you eat sweet potato, if you want some vegetables with butter and all that kind of delicious stuff, do that. But because I think the point is that you want to be able to kind of implement these things as part of the natural part of your diet. So if you have to adjust before and after, then this isn't really a sustainable, natural part of your diet anymore, right? It's like this one kind of specific aberrant thing. So that's my recommendation.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think also with the longer term fast, sometimes if you, for example, I said I didn't really plan this out. I realized I wanted to do on Friday, which is still a few days ahead of time. So with the longer term fast, sometimes you can psych yourself out with that, especially if it's something that you've never done before or you haven't done it in a while. And so if you kind of plan it out and you're thinking about it all weekend, and that can lead you to, one, like you said, have more calories and feel like, oh, I'm fasting for the entire day tomorrow, so I can just eat all the stuff today. That's probably not the best route. So I don't necessarily either think that you should, taper down or anything like that, because you want it to kind of just be something that flows. And with these longer term fasts, for me, it's I want to be able to just fast, wake up, and if I'm not hungry and if I'm really, really busy, I can fast for however long I want to, because I can do that now. I've tested that out, right? I'm metabolically flexible. Or for example, other times when I implement longer term fast would be if I'm going to a conference or something and it's an all day thing. There's not that great of food. There's snacks everywhere and stuff like that. If I want to stay away from that, I'll fast that day. But I don't think, I agree with everything you said. I don't think you have to taper them off, but again, it comes down to you. And if you find that tapering off a little bit helps you, then try it maybe. But yeah, that's kind of my opinion there. All right.
That's what Tiffany's saying.
What would the difference in health benefits be in doing a daily 18-ish hour fast versus a longer 24+ hour fast once a week?
I mean, I don't know if there's any evidence that there is much of a difference. I think it again goes back to the dietary kind of rule of thumb in general. It's the one that's going to help you is the one you're going to do. So if a 24-hour fast stresses you out, that's not going to help. But if thinking about doing a fast every day is stressful, that's not going to help either. So, but I mean, I guess there's evidence. And again, this is different between men and women, right? Because as you said, women were a lot more complicated and generally aren't across the board, that we don't do as well necessarily with fast as men do because of the hormonal complexity of our situation, which isn't to say you can't fast. It's just it's more complicated and it's a little bit more work figuring out what works for women than for men. But I mean, there is evidence, right, that you hit some certain autophagy, best returns after a 36 hours or after 48 hours or something. Sometimes it's really actually long fasts. So you can kind of go down that rabbit hole too. But I think that if you're just trying again to do this for, getting your head around how you're eating and losing a little bit of fat and all that kind of stuff, like pick the one that works best for you. Really.
Yeah. I agree too. Another thing I forgot to mention too is like the digestion part of it. So that's probably the third reason why I wanted to do this 36-hour fast, is just to give my digestion a break. And also just like not think about food as well. Like another tip too for fasting is like, if you are going to implement a 36-hour fast or a whole day fast, the reason why, like I chose Monday, not because it's the beginning of the week, but because it's my busiest day of the week. And I am constantly doing stuff. And sometimes I fast just unintentionally, like I don't eat till 2 or 3 on Mondays not regularly, but sometimes. So that would be another thing, because you don't want to be sitting there, not having anything to do. And then your mind naturally just goes to thinking about food all day. And that more stress to that situation. And you're already stressing yourself out with this 36-hour fast. So adding on to that is not a good idea.
That's another reason why I think that if you're going to play with this stuff at all, again, like a general rule of thumb is during quarantine, thinking about compressed eating windows versus longer fasts just makes so much more sense. It's way less stressful. It's going to help you create a situation where you aren't thinking about food constantly. But yeah, if you're sitting around and you're stressed out and maybe you're bored, or maybe you are working from your kitchen table, doing 24-hour fast regularly probably isn't going to, make you great. All
right. Next question. Do you guys have any tips on portion control?
Man, if we had some good tips on that, we all be millionaires. We had a few. No, but tips that were like easy to follow and worked. I mean,
well, okay. I guess it comes down to, again, where you're coming from. So if you are not tracking and you're trying to, dial in your portion control and things like that, one of the easiest tools that I've found with clients who don't like to track is the handful diet. Have you heard of that?
Yep.
Ash. Yeah. So it's just, like I think I have a graphic about it, but it's really just like looking at, 1 to 2 fists of protein on my plate, maybe like 1 to 2 handfuls of green leafy veggies, and then maybe a cup of carbs if you're doing a starchier carb. And then you can look at like a tablespoon of fat. That's like generally because your portion size for those things are going to, match your hand. So if unless you have big hands, then you have to kind of dial that back a little bit. But we're thinking like women versus men, things like that. So that's one easy way to kind of control portion sizes if you're looking at your meals. Another way, if you are tracking, is I always recommend like planning your meals out ahead of time. So this is something I always go over for, staying consistent and sticking to whatever your goal may be. Planning that out ahead of time, and always starting with protein, like we talked about. So in each meal, like main meal, having like 30 to 40 grams of protein, depending on, I guess it can go like 25 to 40, whatever. And then having, half of your plate with like veggies or most of your plate with veggies, and then whatever the fat comes from. That's another way you can, for me, sometimes I like to eat on smaller plates so that it looks like I'm eating more. That's another portion control kind of tip. I
got a couple to add to this. So, and again, these are just like all tools. Some will work for you and some won't. One thing that I literally was just thinking about today, and I was going to post in the community, but I'll just say it anyway, is mindfulness around how you eat is going to help you keep you from eating more. And one of the biggest ways to do this is to not distract yourself while you're eating. And this is really difficult, and I am very guilty of this, but no screens while you eat, dude. It makes a massive difference. If you're scrolling Instagram or watching Netflix while you eat, you're not thinking about what you're eating. You're not thinking about chewing. You're not savoring the food. It's mindless. It's all mindless, right? Today, before I got on this call, I actually started eating earlier than usual because I didn't want to be hangry on this call. So I had my like sort of late, like a brunch, like a late brunch. And I sat there with no phone and no laptop, and I looked at my food and I chewed my food and I thought about it. And then you're tasting it more, and your satiety signals are going to recognize that you're eating. You know, if you just hoover down your food while you're paying attention to something else, your body doesn't even know if you're full or if you're hungry or whatever. You don't know. So this will slow you down. You put your fork down between bites, you chew your food, so you're digesting it properly. All of these things, slow down and get off your screens while you're eating, is going to make a big difference. So that's one big one for me. And I struggle with this too. So I hear you guys. But
I did that yesterday. So literally what you're saying, I did yesterday, because that's something that I do. So when I broke my fast, I literally put everything away. I took a picture and I was like, I need to concentrate on my food and nothing else. I did that all day yesterday. And I promise you, it makes a huge difference. Yes. That's a really great tip. And it's such a more. It helps your digestion, all of that.
And it's a good mindfulness exercise too. And it's like an appreciation, gratitude thing. Yeah. Another thing that I would say is, if you're a quantity eater like me, like you want to eat a lot of food, you can supplement the important stuff with low calorie, high density food. So like you add a big salad with a bunch of green leafy vegetables, a bunch of like vegetables that are mostly water. You're talking about peppers and asparagus and cucumber and all that stuff. So you're still eating like your good, nice, satisfying portion of protein, and you get your fat on your salad, but you're eating like big amounts of stuff. So I tend to really go for like nutrient dense food. And that's why keto was so hard for me, because if I want to eat all chicken thighs and macadamia nuts and nut butter, my meal is going to be this big, or else I'm going to gain weight, because they're very nutrient or calorie dense, right? So think about incorporating more foods that are lower calorie, but are still going to like add some excitement to your meals. So that's another one. And then like lastly, one of the things that I don't want this to be a bummer, but I just want to like be realistic about stuff, is we live in a culture and an environment that is all about sort of quantity, right? So you go to restaurants and the servings are massive, and you can go to fast food places and get soft drinks that are this big, and you know, everything is big, 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 right? And I remember at one point, like, you know, you go to a restaurant with your partner or your husband or anybody that's larger than you, a man, right? And you're ordering the same entree, you're getting the same amount of food. And like, look, I'm a woman. I don't want to be told by anybody, much less a dude, how much I should be eating, or that there should be like woman-sized portions. But realistically, you should not be eating the same as a 220-pound man. If you're not a 220-pound man, like we are supposed to eat less food because we are smaller people. And I remember the first time that I sort of was going through this like healthy eating process, I was like just getting into CrossFit. Like this is like back in the 08s, like way back in the day. And my husband and I, we were like focusing on like zone diet or whatever it was at the time, like macros basically. And I was really paying attention to the appropriate portion sizes for my body. And every day he had to struggle to eat enough, because he's a big dude. He's an ectomorph. He's like super lean. He loses weight if he like forgets to eat for an hour, whatever. And I'm not that. And I'm somebody who wants to eat as much as him. And so I'm looking at my like portions and I'm like, man, like this sucks. But if you're practicing mindfulness and you're eating nutrient dense foods, I'm not talking 100-calorie packs of mini Oreos and like that. I'm talking about like real food, but the right amount of food. Like it's going to be, what I'm saying is it may be a bit of a adjustment, and there may be periods where you're looking at your food, and if you're trying to lose fat, and if you're recognizing that you actually only have 100 pounds of lean body mass, and so maybe you shouldn't be eating 250 grams of protein or whatever, there's going to be an adjustment period. And maybe there will be times when you're sad that you are a small woman and thus cannot eat a huge amount of food. But guess what? Like this is the reality of our physiology, right? So again, I'm not telling anyone that they have to settle and be restrictive and be sad about the amount of food that they're eating every day, but a little bit of like, let's be realistic here has to come in. And like the way we're taught about portion sizes and that everything is huge and heaping and you should eat until you feel full and you have to undo your belt buckle, that's not the way you're supposed to be eating, right? So that's just sort of another thing to keep in mind. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that with satiety and all of that, like we were talking about, there's different factors that involve satiety. I won't go too far into it, but I wrote a blog post about this that I just took a note. I'll link it, but it's talking about like the different factors of how you get full, right? One is your stomach stretches. That sends a signal to your brain that tells you you're getting full. Protein is a huge one. Protein has the highest satiety versus carbs and fats. So there's different things that you can think about if you are struggling with portion control.
what can you consume that will fill you up and make you feel full, not just while you're eating or right after eating, but for longer periods of time as well. And then how can you become more mindful in chewing your food more? Maybe not, well, this will go in to all digestion stuff, but just being more mindful around that and not like doing, when you're eating, you should be eating and not doing anything else. I fall into this a lot because I like to eat like lunch when I'm working, and I know that's bad. So that's actually a goal that I've been putting into this week, is that I sit down and don't have anything and I just focus on my food. So that's another, just like we said.
Taylor, it's okay that you ate while you were watching us because we're so educational. It's great, but next time.
We have a few more questions. We're getting on. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left.
I want to answer this one, and then I want to answer the one about eating around your family, because I have some thoughts about that one, and then we'll jump off. Yeah. Okay. Solid food after a 36. It's funny because I actually got a couple messages on Instagram and people who were telling me like what they ate after their fast that were like not good ideas. Because, if you're like, that's the other thing. If you're like stressed out and you're like counting minutes until when you can eat again, like chances are you're not setting yourself up to eat something like super nourishing. But I mean, my advice, I would say, do the same thing that you would do before your fast, which is again, like a decent amount of protein and fat that you're going to tolerate really well, that you can digest really well, that you're going to enjoy. I wouldn't go straight back into the carbs, because the whole point of this is to turn on your like fat burning ability, and to not have your blood sugar be going up and down and all this stuff. So the best way to do all that stuff is to go ahead and eat carbs right away. So I would start with some like easy to digest protein and fat. I like to eat eggs and avocado after, or maybe some ground beef and again avocado, because avocado is the best. But yeah, pick some protein, pick some filling protein and fat would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I would say I agree with that. When you do a longer term fast, and this is something that I didn't implement really that much yesterday because I just was kind of rushed with my morning a little bit, which I probably should have planned out better. But when you do a longer term fast, you have to think about, okay, my digestion has been on pause for 36 hours. If you do a 3-day fast, even more. So you don't want to just eat I mean, it depends on the person too. And if you are, it all depends on the person, but generally your body needs to kind of ramp up those digestive enzymes a little bit before you maybe have a huge meal, just to help a little bit, especially if you're new to like longer term fasting. So what I would recommend is kind of breaking, like ideally what I would recommend breaking a longer term fast with would be first having just some water with like some lemon juice, like fresh lemon juice, to get those digestive enzymes flowing a little bit more. Have a little bit of sea salt in there to help. Well, you should be having sea salt throughout the fast anyway for electrolytes. Then just jumpstart that digestion by having ideally a cup of bone broth to something that's easy to digest. You're kind of, again, getting those digestive enzymes going, getting that stomach acid going, things like that. Then maybe like an hour later, this is ideally, right? This is ideal. An hour later, 45 minutes later, have a bigger meal, but not too big. So maybe something that has like a lean protein in it and some easy to digest veggies. So for example, like fish or chicken or something like that with, I'm trying to think back to what I broke my 72-hour fast with, which is a 3-day fast. It was bone broth. And then an hour later I had some bok choy that I boiled down in bone broth and a piece of like fish, like white fish, lean fish, just very easy to digest because again, your enzymes have been off for a while. And then maybe a few hours later have like a bigger meal, which is more protein and fats specifically, and, kind of stay away from those carbs until you've gotten that digestion flowing. Because again, we know if you're having a huge bolus of carbs, even if you're having that with protein and fat, you're still going to be spiking your blood sugar, which could lead to a crash. So you don't want to necessarily do that. So I would say that's like ideally. What I broke mine with was hard-boiled eggs, which is another easy to digest thing for me because I have those all the time, and some coffee, which it worked. And then I had a bigger meal about 2 hours later.
Okay. All right. Let's answer this question about the fasting around your family. Yeah, I like this one because it's obviously a huge challenge for a lot of people if you're trying to do something different with your diet that the rest of the family isn't doing. And I think there's a couple ways around this. So one, like really simple one is if you're not doing like super strict fasting, you can have like your cup of bone broth or mug of bone broth or bowl of bone broth. And it's like kind of like soups. You're sitting down, you're still there. You're still participating with your family. You're still eating, you're having a drink, whatever. Maybe you're drinking the bone broth. Maybe you're drinking your sparkling water with lemon or whatever. You don't have to not participate just because you're not eating the same thing everyone else is. And this also goes for any kind of diet. Like I think back to my bodybuilding days, and a lot of people complain about if you were on a super strict diet, whether it's prepping for a bodybuilding show or whether you're keto or whatever. One of the biggest complaints is that people are like, I can't live a normal life because I can't go out with my friends and eat. I can't get together with my family and I have to eat something different. And I always feel like I have to say no to things. And one of the ways that I approached that in a way that was really sustainable and really minimized the impact it had on my life and my social life is just by not making a big deal out of it. Like there's no rule that says you have to like announce at family gatherings, like, hey guys, I'm keto. Like I'm not going to eat the same stuff, or, like everybody watch out for me. I'm fasting. I can't be doing the same stuff as the rest of you. Like you don't have to make a big deal out of it. Like I remember I was still doing a couple of my bodybuilding preps. I was still doing like work meetings where I was schmoozing with people, that's always booze, right? And there were a lot of times that I mean, let's be honest, there were sometimes I just drank whiskey on the rocks because it was the least problematic thing and I just drank anyway. But, order your sparkling water with lemon and don't make a big deal out of it. You don't have to complain and say, I can't do the same thing, or I'm the weirdo not drinking, or I'm the weirdo who can't eat the carbs. Just don't eat the carbs. Just fill your plate. If you're at Thanksgiving dinner and you're going low carb, just fill your plate with the protein and the fat. So I think there's just a big element with this about perspective change. And if you're making this decision for yourself and you're going to do it and you want to do it, flip that perspective from this is difficult and weird and people are going to look at me weird and this is annoying and I have to be different. And instead think this is something I'm doing for myself and I'm going to minimize the impact on myself and everybody in my family by just choosing not to make a big deal out of it. You just, you participate. You just participate in your own way. And you don't have to make a big deal. That's it. And you don't have to make other people feel weird because, sometimes your family or your friends will give you a hard time because it maybe makes them feel insecure that you're doing something that they're not or whatever. You don't have to preach about it or talk about it. You just eat what you're eating. And if they ask you a question, you can say, I've decided I'm kind of testing this fasting thing out because it makes me feel good, or I'm just doing this low carb keto thing because I really like the way it makes me feel. If they ask you questions, you can answer questions, but it doesn't have to be a thing unless you make it, right? That's kind of how I feel about it.
100% agree. Everything you said, I agree with. I would say one other little caveat to that is, if you're, I don't know if this question was towards the longer term fast or just doing like eating intermittent fasting, things like that. But if you do enjoy eating with your family every night, then structure your day so that you maybe push your fasting off so you don't eat breakfast, right? And then that allows you to eat a bigger meal at night with your family. So it's just structuring for what works with your lifestyle. So you always have to come back to, okay, what works for me? Because what works for me is not going to work for Ashleigh, which is not going to work for you or you or you. So what works for you?
Yeah.
All right.
Do you want to answer the salt question really quick? Because you might be able to answer it quickly. How much salt do you recommend for fasting?
Yeah. So I generally don't measure like my salt ever. I just kind of, if you're on a fasting day. So for example, on Monday, I just made sure that every time I drank water, I put a dash of salt in it. I started the day off with like kind of a half a teaspoon of salt. And I also put salt in my coffee every day. So I add a dash of salt in my coffee every day, which I have already done. So I put a little bit more on Monday. Because that also helps with dehydration. So salt helps with holding on to electrolytes, right? And so if you're drinking coffee can be dehydrating, all that. So I would say and if you're salting your water, like you don't want it to taste like you're drinking from the ocean, kind of just have that little hint. And there's more specifics, like in terms of grams of salt per day, I would say like, I don't know. I don't technically measure that myself. So
again, I feel like if you're only doing it for like, 20 hours, 24 hours, whatever, general kind of rule of thumb is like a pinch, like a little bit. Like I won't even put it in my water. I'll put like a little bit of salt right here and lick it. And
or just salt your food. Yeah. Just salt your food a little bit more.
But if you're not eating, right? Like,
sorry. What?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all your food during your fast. What am I talking about?
Throughout the day, like maybe you're peeing and you're noticing it's a little dehydrated, or maybe you're feeling a little headachy, another pinch of salt. Like there isn't necessarily like a huge science to this, and you don't want to be like downing tablespoons of salt, but like a pinch here and there throughout the day is going to be fine and will probably make a big difference. So kind of
make
just
sure it's good quality too.
Yeah.
Like good quality salt, not just like table salt that you find in a restaurant or, you know, you want high quality sea salt. For sure.
All right. There's one more question. Do you want to just try to get to it before we?
Yeah, let's just do it. What are some signs and symptoms of, what are some signs and symptoms of may not be eating enough? I don't track, but when I did, it was hard hitting my calories.
Okay. I mean, there's probably a lot more information that we would need to like really give you a specific answer. And again, not eating or having a hard time hitting your calories is a less common issue than trying to restrain your calories. But I mean, there are some very simple physiological feelings, like if your stomach's growling, if you're getting hangry, if you're getting irritable and feeling like you're thinking about food too much, you're tired, when foggy, when you normally aren't, like all of those things I think are pretty good indicators that you're not eating enough.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to what your goal is, how are you feeling? And sometimes also one thing that I want to mention is that, you know, the smaller you are, if you are 120 pounds, I mean, Ashleigh likes to eat a lot, but in general, the smaller you are, the smaller your body, the less calories your body needs. You're a smaller person. It takes less for you to function throughout the day. Your body needs less energy, less fuel. That means less calories. If you are 100 pounds and, you know, or 120 pounds, whatever, you know, eating 2,000 calories, that's probably above what your general maintenance is, unless you're working out a lot, unless you are like just genetically, there are some genetics behind this too. There's a little bit of genetics involved with, not a little bit, but there's research and stuff, but genetics behind, you know, your body weight and how many calories you can consume to maintain your weight. And all of that. So this is a kind of a complicated one. And I would like, for me personally, I would need to like know a little bit more about your history and all of that.
Yeah. But again, I mean, maybe even just like, again, a very general piece of advice. If you're somebody who you find yourself under eating, and there could very well be like a mental aspect to this too. Like maybe you have a block against like eating too much. There's like a whole other side that we can discuss like sort of more personally. But if you're just a person who has a really high metabolism and tends to be very lean and tends to not be able to eat enough during the day, you can do what I like to do but can't do, which is eat just really calorically dense food. So if you know, throughout the day are like, I just can't hit my protein goals, or like, I feel like I have to just eat a bunch of stuff before bed because I know I haven't eaten enough during the day, like start going towards foods that are more calorically dense, like put more fat on your salads and on your vegetables and on your meat, like add more butter than you normally would. If these are things you can tolerate, add more coconut oil when you're cooking your eggs, and add more olive oil to your salad, add more nuts and seeds if you tolerate those, because those are added calories that are easy to get down. If you can't get enough protein from your 3 meals a day of protein, consider adding in some kind of smoothie or protein shake with some whey protein or protein that you tolerate really well. Like most times it's a good rule of thumb to not drink your calories, but there are people who need extra calories, have a hard time getting them from their meals. And so then they're going to supplement with liquid calories. So there's always ways to kind of adjust your eating habits a little bit to either expand or contract the amount of calories you're taking in a day, which you can play with as well.
Yep. Love it. Great
advice.
Man,
these girls are going to get tired of us talking all the time, you think?
All right. Maybe. I don't know. Let us know.
Let us know. If you want less live calls, let us know.
But I mean, if you're here, then you want to learn. I mean, that's what this is all about. We're just trying to answer as many questions as we can and provide as much advice and give our different opinions on all of these different things, and realize again that everything that we say is either our opinion or just some advice, things that we've, experienced over the years with ourselves, with the clients we work with. And you have to take all of these things we're telling you and apply them to your life and your lifestyle, and not take them for, okay, after this call, now I need to go do a 36-hour fast.
Yes.
That's not what we're saying. So
hopefully that you say, like, don't just listen to everything you hear. That includes us. Like, it's about, taking in all the information that you can, and then still kind of doing your own research, figuring out what feels right for you, applying it, you know, the way that it works for you, because we're all individuals and it's all going to look a little different. So, but we appreciate everybody who comes on and listens and gives us questions and positive comments, and people who are leaving all of these comments and stuff on the Facebook. Like it is going, the interaction is going better than I could have like ever hoped for. I'm so excited about it.
Yeah, me too.
All right, and we'll be back next tomorrow, literally at noon.
Tomorrow.
Right? To talk about week 2.
Yeah, we just got another question, but I will, Kat, can you ask that in the Facebook group? I don't want to take, well, or we can address it tomorrow. So if you come on tomorrow, we can answer some more questions after we talk about the next week. Mm-hmm. So
yeah, but we'll be back tomorrow at noon Eastern, because we're going to give away some prizes from week 1, and we're going to talk about week 2. We've got a lot going on for fitness, movement stuff. All right.
Exciting stuff. All right. Thanks for chatting with me, Ash.
Bye.
Bye.